Hey, welcome in, welcome back, whichever it may be for you. Today we're going to talk about one of the most simple but basic rigs that everybody should know. Saltwater, freshwater, doesn't matter. It's the Texas rig. Real simple. Don't worry about the peg it doesn't matter. Free slide and weight, hook. That's it. Texas rig. Very simple, very easy to do. When I started out as a kid, we had the original brush hog type bait, creature bait. Very simple. Texas rig is an easy thing to do. Go in about 3 to 4 little carriers in there, little rings on that if you would. Now, we didn't have the offset hook like we have now, but this makes it a lot better. This hook is meant for this kind of bait. It was built for this. So you're free swinging, the original Texas rig, go into the egg sac. Now we're going to Texpose this where you come back out. Now push the worm forward just a hair, poke the hook back in. Texas rig, most simple, easy to do. Everybody should know about this, the Texas rig worm. Now it slides, so when it hits the water, weight may be here, bait will glide down to it. Works very well. Now, if you want to peg it, if you want to flip it in a bush, you put a peg it on there. You slide this down. Now it doesn't slide. It'll go into the cover, get down in there, root around, do its thing. Fish gets on it, this slides up, the weight's able to slide away from it, you fight the fish. Now, if you don't have peggets, if you don't know about the pegget, the line pegget, if you see that right there, it's just a little stopper. They make them black, clear, white. They probably make them in chartreuse. I've not seen them. When I first started fishing the Texas rig worm, learning to flip it, the toothpick, you would insert it at the bottom, clip it off with nail clippers about right here, and then you could slide it down and literally put the other piece of the toothpick beside the hook, and that would keep your weight in there, and it would bounce through cover. It was great. Problem was, when you slid it up, a lot of times it would make a mark or scar the monofilament line that we were using. So a lot of people got away from that and went to the peggets. The peggets are a lot easier. Now they're kind of, and there's ways to do this where you can reuse your pegget, actually put a, it's another video about that. It's a little bit more difficult. So we'll take that off. That's the Texas rig creature bait. Now jump ahead a little bit to the stick worm, basic stick worm. Everybody's like, oh, I'm fishing Cinco. Still same 1/4 inch in. And, you know, talk about saltwater, so same thing. Now the original Texas rig, that was it. You didn't go all the way through the worm. Now, what we figured out through the years, if you come through there, you get a better bite ratio. It comes down on there, works great. That is the correct way to do it. Flounder, redfish, guys think you're crazy when you tell them that. Texas rig worm, saltwater, works great. If you're not doing it, they have their own baits. They call them eels. They look just like this, but they call them an eel. Some of them have a little flat spot on the bottom, but that's that. Spear worm, didn't matter. If it was a plastic, you can Texas rig it. You can Texas rig a swim bait. I'll show you that here in a minute. But you Texas rig this thing, and you want it straight. You want it flat. And then it goes and it does its thing down. That's a jelly worm. They'll spear man's jelly worm. I've got some antique baits in here now. I'm telling you. Then you've got today's baits, the creature baits, the sweet beavers. Same thing. You come down about 3 rings, come out. Very basic, very simple. Easy to do. You flip it, Carolina rig it. It's still a Texas rig hookup. The Texas rig is the basis for whether you're free rigging, whether you're flipping, you're Carolina rigging. The only thing you're moving is the weight changes, but it's still a weedless rigged plastic. You can throw it weightless, looks like that. It's still a Texas rig to me. So keep that in mind. I'll show you something else too. You know, we talked about the swim bait, putting a swim bait on here. Now this is good, especially if you get around a lot of vegetation and those fish are up in there. Redfish love these little swim baits on the coast. Bass love them on the... Now, 100% weedless, you swim it, you bring that down and peg it, and you can swim it through there. A lot of people overlook that. Don't think about it. They just don't think about it. Works really, really well. So that's some options for the basic Texas rig. We'll go over the weight real quick. That is a lead weight. Best thing ever made, lead weights. Now, same size, tungsten. So you can see why people go to the tungsten. It's much smaller than the lead. But lead's about a quarter of the cost too. So, but we all have people in our lives growing up. I'll tell you a quick story about the Texas rig and why I was showing you that. So growing up here on Toledo Bend, there was a man named Luther Bowman, was from Alvin, Texas. This man was like family to me. My granddad knew him. He was a few houses down. Cool old guy. He was just a cool old dude. He had a little Honda 110, little dirt bike, had a piece of carpet on the gas tank, and had a little white poodle, little maybe 8-10 pound poodle, would ride on the gas tank. And that to me as a kid was the coolest thing. He had a dog that rode a motorcycle with him, right? But he fished every day. Him, and there was a gentleman by the name of Alderman, and then there was another Bowman. They weren't related. We called him George Bowman, and then Little Bowman. So, and then Luther Bowman. So depending on who was talking to him, was George was Little Bowman, and then Luther was Big Bowman. So it was kind of, kids like, well, they got to be related. Same name. They weren't related. Both excellent fishermen. But Luther was the first person to ever take me out. My granddad was not a big bass fisherman. He was a big crappie guy, catfish, trot lines. So Grandpa got it set up, and Luther come by the dock one day, and I was down there getting ready to get in my little flat bottom boat and go do my fishing. He said, hey, you want to grab your stuff and jump in the boat and fish with me this afternoon? And I was like, oh, that would be amazing, to be able to go out and fish with you, because they come in, they had stringers of fish. And if you've heard about these stringers, a lot of people haven't. But on Toledo Bend, there used to be a deal. It was 5-pound bass and above. 5 pounds used to be the trophy. Not 10, not 12, 5. And there's marinas, there's still a few around, that have 15 and 20 stringer fish. Okay, they have 20 on the stringer. All are 5 pounds and above. Okay, Luther was one of those guys that could catch that. Luther Bowman caught the very first 10-pound largemouth that I ever saw in my life out of Toledo Bend. Now, this would have been in the late 70s, early 80s when he caught this 10-pounder. Those were almost unheard of. That was like a dinosaur fish. And before Florida strain really got out there and got big. But anyway, so this particular day, I got in the boat with him, and we head out. Of course, we know we're going to fish worms. We're going to fish a Texas rig worm. We're going to fish around the hydrilla, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to fish a 6-inch curly tail worm or an 8-inch curly tail worm. And it's going to either be purple and silver flake, purple worm, or you're going to throw a strawberry silver flake worm. Or then he broke out the secret stuff. Now I'm in the boat. Those two worms he would tell people about. The grape with the silver, strawberry with the silver. He would tell you about those. We get out there. He pulls out motor oil. Now, if you don't know what a motor oil worm looks like, it's real similar to a watermelon, but it had a little bit of red sheen in it. And then he pulls the magic out. It's the motor oil gold flake worm. And Zoom has them out every now and then. You can find them. They made a silver flake, a red flake, and the gold flake. And the gold flake in the summertime on Toledo Bend, Sam Rayburn, was the deal. And it was a guarded secret, right? You don't tell nobody what color you're fishing. Oh, I'm fishing grape or fishing strawberry. That was the colors you let out. Fire and ice, which was blue and red flake in a clear, kind of a smoke base, and motor oil red, motor oil gold, you didn't tell nobody about. So I'm in the boat. He breaks these out. He says, let me put the right worm on there for you. And we go to fishing. We start fishing. We're fishing South Tennessee Bay. I won't never forget this ever in my entire life, because it was like the biggest day of my life, right? I'm learning to catch fish, Texas rig with what I considered a pro, because he caught fish every day. So we're fishing. He looks over his shoulder. Now, to set it up, these are the long cigar-shaped bass boats. You got a guy in the front, guy in the back. You're in line. You didn't stand up. You didn't walk around. You sat where your seat was, and you swiveled. So I'm back there, and he'd glance over his shoulder, and he'd look at me, and I'd probably made 4 or 5 casts to his one. And he's like, stop. You're fishing way too fast, son. Way too fast. You're not going to catch these fish like that. And I'm like, well, how do you know? How do you know? I'm a 10-year-old kid. How do you know how fast is too fast? Best advice I've ever been given, ever. He says, well, your grandmother would kill me. So you're not old enough to chew tobacco, so you're going to have to watch. But he chewed Levi Garrett, And this is how he taught me how to fish a Texas rig worm, to know whether you're fishing it slow enough or not. So if you think you're fishing slow enough, fish a little slower. You take a chew of tobacco, put it in your mouth. You put your worm on there. You spray it with WD-40. Yes, I said WD-40. That was the fish attractant. Two things you'd put on your worm: WD-40, Levi Garrett spit, Red Man spit, whichever one you were chewing on. Now, you used to think, oh, what is WD-40 in there? Put on that was fish attractant. You didn't spray it on the pliers. You could on the reel, you could, but that was actually their fish attractant. They never said anything. Nowadays we use kicking bass, and that is a better formula and it's better for the fish and it's natural. But WD-40 was the fish attractant, and it worked. I mean, if you ever gotten any on your hands and around your mouth, it's got a sweet flavor to it. It repels water, so it stayed on the baits, and it didn't wash off like some of the stuff that was being sold back then. So he cast out. He's got his chew. He doesn't click the reel. He's letting it free fall to get to the bottom. He explains this to me. You let it fall without clicking your reel, you don't lose the length of your cast. If not, it pendulums back towards the boat, and you lose a lot of your length on your cast because it's already back half to the boat. So he lets it get to the bottom. He's chewing and chewing and chewing. Slack line on the surface of the water. You know it's on the bottom. Click your reel. He still hadn't picked up no slack. Watching his line, holding his rod. He spits. He says, now I can take the slack up, feel to see if anything's picked it up. So he picks it up, the slack, feels the worm, sets it back down, chews a little bit longer, spits again. So now he's spit twice and he's not moved the worm. So finally he says, okay, spit twice, now you can move the worm. Lifts the rod up to about 10 o'clock, lets it back down, feels it all the way back down, chews his tobacco, spits again. He says, now you can move it again. So now he's spit 3 times and he's moved the worm 1 time. So that's how slow he has fished this worm. I've made 2 or 3 more casts. So about that time, he sets the hook on one. So we go along, and it's about 45 minutes or so. I'm finally slowing down. Excitement's there, but I'm not catching anything, and he's whooping on me with them. So I threw it out there, and I'm sitting there, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I watch him spit twice. Literally watched him spit because I'm 10, and I moved my worm. All of a sudden, I let it back down, and as I let it back down, I felt a little thump. Well, when you feel that thump, you reel down. And you got to keep in mind, we're using pistol grip rods, so you reel down to the surface of the water, and you set the hook back over your head so that you got a good hook set. Zepco 33 goes crazy. Caught the largest bass in my life that day. It was a little over 5 pounds. We got it mounted, and up until about 13 years ago when we had a house fire, I had that fish on my wall to that day. Very proud. Come back in. Of course, I get ribbed. Grandpa's like, oh, Luther caught that and let you say that you caught it so you didn't feel bad because he caught all the fish. And Luther was like, no, he actually caught it. He actually, once he got it and slowed down, he got it. He knew what to do. And from that day forward, I knew how to fish that worm. I knew how to slow down. And it made such a big difference in my life as far as knowing how to fish the worm, how slow to fish it, and then knowing the right color, because I didn't tell anybody. I put them worms in my pocket. I kept them there. I was swore to secrecy by Luther Bowman, and that's where we left it. So for a long time, I was catching fish nobody else was, all on a Texas rig. And you can't fish it wrong. You can just fish it too fast. There's people that swim the worms back nowadays, and you see these guys, they'll throw a Texas rig out towards the brush, and they'll bounce it 2 or 3 times and burn it back in. But if you're truly fishing a Texas rig worm, and that is what you're trying to catch them on, it's almost like take the kids, throw it out, let them goof off a little bit, move it. And a lot of times when you go to move it, that fish has already got it. And if he doesn't have it, he's going to pick it up. Now, they don't have hands, they don't have thumbs, but they will grab that worm. And so many of them, that hook is right here in that worm sack. So you got that much worm. And that fish will grab it. It's on the bottom. He'll grab it like this and he'll swim. And then the next thing he'll do is he'll suck it in. And once he sucks it in, then you set the hook. A lot of times you'll miss him come back with a part of a worm. You're not waiting long enough for him to get that second bump. Now, Bill Dance threw out there years back. I forget who he was fishing with on one of his shows, but they said, you just missed another fish. And I think it might have been Jerry Reed. And he's like, well, how do you know that? He goes, how do you know? He said, well, you felt 3 taps, didn't you? He goes, yeah, I felt 3 taps. He goes, well, the first tap, the fish picked it up. Second tap, fish spit it out. Third tap was me tapping you on the shoulder going, you just missed another one. So there are times where you do need to set the hook really fast, but usually you wait for that second bump or you feel them swimming off with it, then you set the hook. Hey, I hope y'all enjoyed this story. That's how I learned how to fish a Texas rig. I enjoy telling y'all these. Y'all tune in, tell some people about them. We'll do them every week. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Y'all get those kids in the outdoors. The toes in that line. Set the hook.